Hello everybody and welcome to Documentation Not Included, a tech industry podcast presented by D&I Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. I nearly got it out. I'm usually okay at this, just usually messes it up and I'm usually alright, but I messed it up today. Anyway, it is 7 o'clock BST and we are live on twitch.tv/D&I Stream. I'm your host, Chris Seabuck. It's all going wrong. And today I'm joined by a returning guest, Parul Singh. Last time Parul was on to talk about mental health, or rather high pressure burnout in high pressure environments, and basically for our guests and people who hadn't had the oh my lord, oh my god, it's too hot.
Blame it on the heat. Yeah, that's what I've done for the last 3 days. I'm like, brains turn to mush, it's the heat.
So please introduce yourself, Parul.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm coming back. We did this a couple of weeks ago. So I'm a tech recruitment consultant based in Manchester, working for Manhattan Partners. I'm also the company's mental health advocate as well. So I'm champion in the... What have you done?
I've cursed you as well, have I?
Listen, yeah, do you know what? I'm all right today. So, championing like good practices, not just like within the organisation, but outside as well. And so work alongside a lot of my clients, not just providing just the usual recruitment solutions. It's about how they can provide support to their employees for like their mental health. A lot of my passion for this actually stems from my own experiences, having suffered from anxiety for about 5 years, and more recently probably depression for maybe like the last 9 months. So that I am also booked in to have mental health first aid training,
cool.
Which is going to be next week on Friday. So that's a new thing since I actually came on here. So that's just going to give me like another level of like knowledge and experience, maybe in other areas that I don't have experience with like firsthand, to be able to help all of the employees of our company and externally. I have also booked in for our first like mental health and wellbeing catch-ups with all of the newbies individually, because we've had 3 starters since we last spoke as well. So it's been a while. So I'm really excited to talk a little bit more, just carrying on from the last time. And thank you so much for having me again. I must have done all right.
Well, I said we didn't quite cover everything we wanted to talk about last time. And with most of our guests, we always, generally, most of the time, we invite people back because an hour is never enough, and we do ramble a little bit. We're not like an edited podcast. We don't tend to do, we put out what we do live. With the occasional edit, tiny little edits every now and again. But anyway, so yes, thank you very much for Parul. Thank you for introducing yourself. Before we get into the main core of the subject, I'll just say hello to everybody in Twitch chat. Please do get involved with the show. It is live. We will answer questions. Please share your experiences as well. Last time Parul was on, we had quite an active chat. We had quite a lot of people telling us about their workplace burnouts and how they've experienced the same kind of issues. So, on to today's show, entitled... Hang on. No, I missed something. Oh, Josie would have me. I've missed the icebreaker. Our icebreaker. So our icebreaker is a little thing that we do to get to know our guests and let the audience get to know the hosts as well a little bit more. I think last time we took you off guard a little bit, Parul, with... soup versus... I think you reminded me soup versus... Is cereal a soup? I think that was the last time.
Assembly required, so
yeah. Well, we're not doing it again. So anyway, today's icebreaker is: what item has been on your personal to-do list for the longest? Which are you most embarrassed about?
Oh God. Oh.
I can give you a minute to talk to think, and I'll answer first if you're.
Oh.
Okay, right. I'll tell you what. I'll go with mine. Up until, I would say, the last week, I've had a item on my to-do list for close to 12 years, which has been fix a leak on my chimney. And it's not been my fault. It's been... I think the last set of roofers that have come along have fixed the problem finally, I think. And it has not been cheap, but hopefully it's done. We've had some bad storms this week over where I live. Probably over the north of England, I'm not sure. But it's hopefully sorted. But that would have been, up until last week, that would have been my thing. Now, the thing that's been on my to-do list probably longer than the chimney is this. Right, I'm a clean and tidy person, right? I just want to just point that out before I do this.
Okay.
Right, that is my pile of shame. That is where all of my old tech, so there's speakers, there's televisions, there's monitors, there's games, there's old computers, there's loads of old consoles and things underneath that. I've got loads in the attic as well, but basically that is my pile of shame. Our house is quite tidy. I am a tidy person. This drives me up the wall. But it's one of those things that it's not important. Everything else in life comes before it. So that's my the thing that's been allowed to do this longest.
Because you kind of like, you own that house and you stay in that house. So I don't think I've got anything as bad, because I've kind of moved around houses for uni, and then like after, and I've just moved into like a new place. But I would say, does it have to be something that's still on the to-do list?
If you haven't got anything, I'll let you off with something that you've recently signed off and it's been...
Yeah, I'm actually not that bad. I'm like really tidy at the moment. So.
You're not that old either, though, you see. You haven't had that much time to accumulate mental debt.
I have it in my mum and dad's house. It's quite bad, but they're just as bad of hoarders as me. But I would say that when I had a car, it probably got like really needed a clean, like a nice valet for a good like 7 months, I think, maybe a little bit longer, maybe about 9 months. I just couldn't be bothered, and I knew I was getting a new one because the lease was up, so I just didn't do it.
I'll let you have that. 7 months is
quite bad.
I haven't valeted my car for years, but I keep it quite tidy. I don't have much stuff in it, but I've seen people who look like they live in the car. My mum, for example, her car is just a tip. Absolute tip.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Mackey's wrappers like everywhere, but now I've got new one. It's just like, you only eat in the car if it's hangover foods. That's the general rule.
Yeah, I don't eat in my car. I've said I'm quite tidy, quite clean. But anyway, right. So let's move on to today's subject. So a little, not quite as lighthearted as our introduction, but we're going to talk about mental health, workplace support. As always, I want to start with a quick question. And I haven't prepared you for this one, so hopefully you can answer it. So, do you think the term mental health, in inverted commas, has negative connotations attached to it?
Yes, because I think generally I didn't even have to think about that. This is just generally like from my experience, like whenever you say that, people kind of like, if you don't really know them that well, they kind of can like get a little bit awkward. And for example, if you would be comfortable talking about it in, let's say, in an interview, of course, you're a contractor, so maybe technically not the same for you, but say for most people.
Similar situation, yeah.
If we don't feel comfortable talking about mental health, maybe like in an interview, the first time that you're meeting a potential employer, then yeah, I definitely would say it has negative connotations, because it's just kind of like one of those things that people encourage you to talk about more, but then if you do talk about it, they kind of get a bit awkward. So yeah,
so that harks back to a post I saw from another streamer who talks about his mental health a lot. In fact, I'll mention his name because he's a friend of the show, and he does development streaming. Copper Beardy, he's been on the show quite a bit.
I remember him.
And he talks about his mental health a lot and the struggles that he's went through throughout a number of years. And he posted on LinkedIn, because he's looking for a job at the moment, and he posted on LinkedIn saying, every time I apply for a job, I send them my CV, and he doesn't have that much experience on his CV. He's looking for development jobs, but he's struggling. And he does have on his CV that he's been, for a number of years, he's raised children despite his mental health problems. And I said, it's not that I don't think you should talk about it. I don't see mental health as a particularly negative issue, from my eyes, but I totally understand how an employee who doesn't know you, who you are a completely faceless, you're a faceless piece of paper at this point. If they're looking at a piece of paper and the first thing you mention is, I have children and I have mental health problems, then they're probably going to put you to the bottom of the pile. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
Yeah.
But it's the truth of the matter, isn't it?
Yeah. Unfortunately. I think just if you take away that aspect of it, I think we actually had a really good discussion about what should be in like technical CVs and whatnot in the Manchester Tech Slack group yesterday. So like some really interesting points raised there, where you know, when you talk about things outside of your skills and experience, like people like to see a little bit of like the character, but then I guess it's a very like controversial matter is like, how deep do you actually go with that? Because like you said, at the point of somebody receiving a CV, they don't know anything about you. You've never really spoken to them, and like you're a faceless person. So.
But how do you think we could change that? Do you think we should change that? Do you think that is a problem? Do you think, is it something that should be on a CV? I know we're kind of diverging a little bit, but it's all related. Do you think it's something that should be on a CV? Because it's the first point of contact you have with a potential employer. You know, I wouldn't put, I've only got one leg on my CV. And I'm not, and it's the same, when you think about what it is, it's the same thing. It's a personal trait, I suppose, but it's...
Have you got one leg?
It doesn't matter, does it? I sit down all day. The point is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't stop me from doing my job, and it doesn't hinder me from doing my job. Now, if you put it on your CV, then that potentially says to me as an employer that it might hinder me. But that isn't really what we're talking about here. We're talking about when you are in a job, I suppose. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
Actually, I mean, this actually came up. I did I can actually post, I can add the link into DNI stream a bit later, just because it's actually not been uploaded, because we literally did it today over lunch. And somebody was talking about, it was an anonymous question actually, so I don't know who it was anyway, but they posted about that. I have a bipolar disorder, and is it the right thing to sort of like disclose that in like an interview process and other things? And I said there should be a point where if people want to disclose it, they can. So if they've gone through an agent or like a recruiter such as myself, I always make people feel like really comfortable and say, you know, is there anything that you want the client to know before you go into an interview? For example, this doesn't just tie into like mental health, but it also ties into things like neurodiversity and people on the autism and Asperger's spectrum. So for example, somebody who is on the autistic spectrum might really struggle to keep eye contact in an interview, but is that not one of the main things that you're told to do? But they are unbelievable. They have an immense like number of like other skills. So I would really hope that, but like, can you explicitly ask somebody to like disclose it? Like, should we be doing that? Should HR or internal recruitment, the sort of pit people like in between? It's we're with the kind of worms here. Like, could you talk about
that's the thing, is this is a catch-22 situation, because when you talk about something like autism, someone who has either any kind of mental health issue or is on the autism spectrum or anything like that, they don't necessarily know how to or want to or feel like they might feel less of a person because of how society views them. They might not want to disclose that, but it might actually, in some instances, it might actually help them in an interview. For example, I have interviewed people who have they've completely aced technical questions, but when it comes to anything like an icebreaker question or just small talk or just being just generally friendly, or they freeze up and they don't know what to do. And I remember this one guy who'd worked on like the computers inside Formula One cars, and they have to be perfect, you know. These computers, they could kill the driver if they're not right, you know. So he knows what he's doing, but he could not talk to me, and I assume he was, I mean, again, I assume maybe I shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and, you know, tried to make him relax and stuff, but not every interviewer has those skills either. Maybe I don't, maybe I just think I do.
I think it's just like an educational thing as well. I actually, until about 2 months ago, I wasn't even familiar with the term neurodiversity. And I then went away and I read a lot into it and looked, I think only 19%, I will have to double check this stat by the way, but I think it's only 19% of autistic adults are in full-time work, and 70% of them actually want to be in full-time work. So It's about if you don't know a lot about an area, this goes for like mental health as well. If you don't know a lot about an area, it's going to help you or other people around you. It's like that we have the internet now, right? So it's a lot easier than it was like 20 years ago just to read up about a topic, and you just don't know what difference that's going to make. I really hope to be, and my aspiration is to be leading teams and like managing people soon. So that's really important for me to actually understand, if there's people within my team who are autistic, or somebody is bipolar, or somebody is like really, really depressed, to, beyond maybe what I am. So I would, maybe I just couldn't understand. It's just read, educate yourself, like talk to people.
I think when you're in that position, in a position of leadership, and we've done shows on leadership before, and we've had some really strong leaders and some people who are very passionate about the subjects that you talk about. It's not just mental health diversity or neurodiversity, which I hadn't heard the term before, so thank you for that. That's my BOI on for later on. It's people who are in the LGBT community, people who are in minorities. They in those situations. I've forgotten. I've lost my train of thought for some reason. But yeah, it's. I think having an that's it, leadership. So I think having an understanding of other people, and the fact that people aren't machines, and people need support in more ways at work and outside of work, in more ways than just right, here's some work to do, get on and do it. I think that's the key here, and some employers don't see that, and some leaders specifically don't maybe get the training that they need for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that comes into a couple of the points later on, where we're talking about like mental health training within leadership. But one of the main things I wanted to talk about is get this question like a lot from people. When I start talking about mental health, like corporate support, is like should there be allocated mental health days? I don't even think there should be allocated holiday days, sick days, or mental health days, because that's what my company do. And I know I'm always like harping on about them, but that's because they're setting a precedence for what I think a lot of companies should actually be doing at Manhattan Partners. So for example, I might get to like lunchtime and things have just piled up so much, and maybe I'm just feeling really anxious. I'll just message my boss and I'm like, do you know what? I'm just going to take the afternoon. I'm just going to like decompress. It's like, okay, fine. They're not tallying it up and being like, okay, you've taken half a day, so now you've got X number of days left for like mental health, or even having to like forfeit pay, because also work for companies like that. So what happens when you actually let people have that and they don't take the piss with it? Because so it's like a couple of stats I made a note of, because these really shocked me as well when I read them. So I just thought I'd share that. In the UK, 70 million work days are lost to mental health every year, which is the equivalent of £12.4 billion per year, which is 12.1% of the UK's entire GDP.
That is a big number.
It's a big 12.1% of the UK's entire GDP. I've actually put the link in the bottom.
Right, I'm going to say, do you know how they came to those figures exactly? Apart from the overall figures, things like how do we know? Sorry, how does the 2.4 billion?
Yeah.
So when we say lost, is that lost earnings for the companies, or is it lost earnings for the employees?
It's a combination. So again, you post the link at the bottom,
I'll post it in chat for people.
Awesome. So it's basically a combination of, obviously direct money lost, so maybe from like sick days, which will be absenteeism, but there's also something called presenteeism. So presenteeism is when people come into the workplace because either they feel obligated, either because they're going to lose money otherwise, but they're not working at peak productivity, so they may as well not actually be there. So that was something, again, when I was doing like a little bit of research around this and like mental health support, and this was like a new term to me as well. When I speak to people, it's quite new to them as well. And now when you look back, so think about like when you were a employee, God knows how long, it might be a while for you. Like, were you ever in a situation where you didn't take days that you really needed to, just because maybe you didn't have 6 days left, maybe you felt really, really bad, maybe you just joined the company?
No, because I've always been a fairly confident person, and I've always been very good with my days as well. So I've never. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been days when I'd like to have more time off in a year. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but I don't mean, certainly not that. I'm the wrong person to ask that question, if I'm entirely honest.
Of course, of course. I mean, if anybody in the chat wants to pop it in there, but I think again from my own experiences and a lot of people that I know, you know, whether it's physical health or like mental health, they've just kind of like dragged themselves in when you pretty much feel at death's door. I remember doing it once because I was within my like 6 months of like probation or whatever,
Yeah,
actually have any allocated sick days. And I was on the tram into work from Manchester and I felt so sick. I was really dizzy. I sat on the floor of the tram because there were no seats, so I was standing anyway. Sat on the floor of the tram, got to work, sat there for 30 minutes, and then managed to get the balls to just say, I'm too sick, I'm going to go home. Why did I do that in the
I
first
mean,
place?
don't get me wrong. I've done that. I've done that off my own back when I've been out to have a drink when I was younger and came into work just because I didn't want to lose a day's work. But that's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, of course. So when you take into account like all of the days lost, if you consider if we allowed, not, I hate the word allowed as well because it sounds like it's like a privilege. It should be a right for you to have the time to look after yourself. My boss has done it as well, you know, just basically said, you know, today really, really, I mean, she's a director of like a startup. So I mean, you're gonna be like pretty stressed. You know, how she wears very many hats, and you know, she just at this point it was just me, her, and the other director, and said that I'm going to take like a mental health day today. If just ring me if it's anything urgent, and I'll see you like the day after, hopefully. And that was a totally normal conversation. I think just normalize saying that I need some time for myself. I know some companies actually allocate like duvet days. I think that's
Yeah.
quite. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I've probably said this to you before, and I've certainly said it on the podcast a number of times. I'm a big advocate of productivity versus bums on seat.
Yes.
I mean, I know I am a contractor, and I know my place when it comes to being a contractor. My clients don't have to worry about me, about my mental health, about my days off, my sick days. They get what they pay for. I work a day, they pay me a day or an hour or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But if a client expects me to be on site just because everybody else does, or just because that's the way they do things, then I get defensive, I suppose, about it, almost to the point where I'll just not do it to make a point, if you know what I mean, because it isn't important to me. What's important is the fact that I am delivering, and that should be the same for everybody. So when it comes to things like duvet days, for mental health days, sick days, holidays, anything like that, it's about trust.
Yes.
It's about trusting your employees, about trusting your team members, and trusting that you've given, again, your leaders, because every team needs a leader. There might be more than one leader in a team, but every team needs a leader. It's about giving the leaders the support that they need to be able to mentally trust that people are getting the work done. Now, if somebody has a situation, for example, where they are having 6 months of the year off with mental health issues, then that is not sustainable for a business. Let's be entirely honest.
For a business to be paying in like full pay, maybe they could consider, I don't know, like going like part-time or something. But yeah, I definitely see I see both sides.
So it's not necessarily, I'm not trying to downplay mental health. I'm trying to say that it works on both sides at the same time. Yes, people are going to be sick. Yes, people are going to have, but sickness and mental health should be treated the same way, no matter how it is looked at. You know, and it shouldn't be. I mean, if someone's off with a cold, you know, they don't come into the office for other people's benefit usually. If someone's off with mental health, they don't come into the office because they need time, and it's for their own benefit. It's not really, because it's not really. It might affect the rest of the team, but generally it wouldn't. It would be them stewing inside themselves, and sometimes they might need to come into the office. They might need to speak. That might be better for their mental health, because it depends on the situation they're in. Sometimes people's home life is what causes the mental health issues, you know?
It's different for everyone.
That's
And you know, when you said that, you know, when you say that like mental health and physical health should be like treated the same. And so then you could say, you know, maybe you just get like more like sick days, but then I think people don't like to put them together, because people almost, we, at the end of the day, I don't think I will take my mental health sometimes as seriously as maybe like physical health. Do you know what I mean? You try to like physically power through it sometimes when you feel like you need to. But if like you've got a broken leg, like you can't walk on it, right? Need to go and like get a cast and, you know, get it all sorted. But I think having like separate kind of like mental health or like duvet days encourages people to take those times for the days where it might not even be proper mental health related. Like when we talk about mental health, you can also talk about like well-being. People, you know, like can suffer, you know, like low moods and different things, and just not being in the right headspace without having like mental health disorders, like, you know, diagnosed, like, okay, you're like depressed. You know, everyone has like under the weather days, but it's one of those where you don't feel right enough to work or work properly at, you know, your usual productivity.
I absolutely get that. I mean, I have down days. It's not the same. I can never. I don't want to take anything from people with mental health issues or with depression or anxiety, because I don't have that, and it's hard for me to put myself in the same catchment when I have a down day, you know.
Yeah.
But I certainly think it should be taken more seriously, and I certainly think it shouldn't be taboo. People shouldn't poo-poo it. If it gets brought up, if I raise a concern with my manager that, you know, if I feel strong enough to raise a concern with my manager that I am suffering because of this, I've got too much work to do, I need, you know, or I'm just not coping very well with this particular workflow, or whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be work related. I need someone to be able to talk to. The fact is that you spend a lot, I don't know exactly how much, there will be statistics out there, but a lot of your life in work, doing work. If you are a permanent employee, a lot of your day, most of your working day is spent at work. So it has to be a happy
environment,
good environment for you, and a productive and supportive environment for you. And if an employer isn't providing that to employees, then they need to change. Simple as that. I'm not talking about employees running off to another place. I'm talking about the employer needs to change.
Yes. Yeah, and again, that, I mean, you can tie it into a lot of different things, but from like recruitment, the joys of living in Manchester city centre, you can just hear the sirens.
Can't hear anything, don't worry.
regular basis. There was like some sort of construction going on while I was trying to do the webinar at lunch. That was fantastic. But what I was going to say is that you can tie that into like retention as well. You know, tech is a very like competitive market, and there are a lot of the reasons why people come to me and asking, you know, I'm looking to move on. It's not because of like salary and things. It's just because they don't feel like looked after where they are. They don't feel like they have the support. They don't feel like valued, the mental health support, the wellbeing support, like the flexibility. And it's just another point that we were going to talk about as well, wasn't it? That with like, this is one of the like actual tangible things that companies can do. It's give your people more flexibility. Like if you don't have it, I'm actually quite apprehensive of even working with clients that don't offer like flexibility around their working hours, because that kind of tells me that they like to like micromanage people, because I don't feel like developers have to work a 9 to 5. I find it quite strange. So when you have, again, going back to some of my own experiences, I used to work 8 to 5:30. That's contracted hours, but I got in 15 minutes earlier, and I'd often do an extra hour in the evening. So I was actually 7:45 to 6:30 plus an hour of travel each way. So it was, it was quite a lot. So by the time I wasn't really doing anything on a weekday except for eating and sleeping. On the weekends, I was pretty like shattered. So my like quality of life was really poor. Add to that, like the amount of stress. I wasn't making enough money. I didn't have time to spend it as well. So once you put all of that together, mental health actually really, really suffers because you miss out on all of the things that make you feel better. I'm not saying like being able to go to the gym and see your friends and stuff cures depression, because like it
No, no.
doesn't, but it helps. It helps, and
does
it's
help.
so underrated. It's so underrated. So
The thing is, if you're constantly under pressure from your job, and you're spending so even more of your waking hours. I mean, I do these days. I'm very lucky. I do whatever I want. Right. My clients get 7.5 hours per day if as a standard work day. I don't care what my contract says. I argue and I say, no, you get 7.5 hours. That is what I do. Simple as that. But I've got the experience and the confidence to do that, and not everybody does. And I do not commute into offices on a daily basis. I'm happy to go in if I need to. I did I haven't done it recently because of the COVID thing, but I do training on site. I do workshops, handovers, that kind of thing. But I'm different from an employee. Unfortunately, employers have a certain element of control over employees by law. They're not slaves, of course, but they do have more control than they have over a contractor. That is how it works. But that is down to the individual employer as to how much control they assert over their employees. And this is the flexibility thing. If I'm not getting a quality of life while I'm doing some work, I don't care how much I'm getting paid. I will hate it. I've turned down extremely lucrative work in Manchester, in London, or abroad, because I'm going to be away from my wife and my cats and my guinea pigs. Because that is my quality of life. And that's what I care about. And that's what should be, that's what's important to me.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't really matter what's important to me. It doesn't concern my employer or my clients, as it shouldn't with yours. They should empower you and give you the right tools and the right flexibility to do that, to do what you need to do, to be happy in your life.
Yeah, I think it is easier said when, for example, I've gone from a larger company to like a startup as well. So I think it's a lot easier to actually, again, having the trust in your staff, because we are very tight knit. We all constantly talk on WhatsApp like throughout the day. We all meet up for going for, drinks after our like monthly catch ups and things like that. But what I have to think about is, how do we maintain this kind of like, all of like the mental health support and everything for like, as we grow bigger, like how do you manage it as you scale?
See, this is what I've
a really hard question, really, really difficult question, because I think all companies actually should have somebody who takes kind of dedicated ownership of driving like these like good practices which benefits people's mental health and well-being. But it should be everybody's responsibility to get involved. It's just like that person will, organize things, like review things, but all managers, all people at like every level should actually get involved with it. And eventually it will just become such a normalized and like regular thing that that person's role might completely dissolve. Like maybe it won't be needed anymore. That's what I think.
Have you've obviously heard of it. You've heard of the term Scrum Master before, yeah?
Yes.
Do you know what a Scrum Master is? I mean, I know you've recruited for them, but do you know what they do on a daily basis? Do you know what they're... Sorry?
You've proper put me on the spot here. So
it's fine.
I understand the different roles of people, obviously within sort of like a tech team, my specialism being like developers, but like my understanding is that like, because Scrum is like a subset of Agile, and it's a way, and they sort of like plan and like manage the sprints and managing like different tasks. No.
So let me no, but that's a common misconception. So what a Scrum Master is, so what you've just described there is a combination of like a product owner. Someone who's a product owner owns the product and isn't usually technical, and they usually feed into the development team. The development team aren't just developers. They might be the product owner, developers, QA people, testers, database developers, all kinds of people. Sorry about that noise. But a Scrum Master is the evangelist for the team. A person, if it's a big company and you've got very, very busy teams, you might have a Scrum Master who's dedicated to that role. But normally it's somebody who's senior, who's been trained in Scrum and Agile and knows what it does. What you've just described to me there is a mental health ambassador. Is at the moment, it's part of your role where you work. Yeah. But it could easily be if you become a bigger company, it could easily become your full-time role for a certain period of time. Like a Scrum Master, while they are setting up the Scrum, and while they are managing and essentially not managing people, but a Scrum Master serves everybody. What they do is they're called a servant leader. So they lead by serving the development team, serving the product owner, serving everybody and everything. They lead by example, let's say, and that's essentially what a mental health ambassador should really be doing. I would have thought, because they are advocating that people talk about mental health, that people that policies are in place within the business for mental health provisions, that kind of thing. So it's like a Scrum Master for mental health, from what I understand.
Yeah, almost. Do you know what? I never thought about it that way. By the way, just for you and anybody else, my Wi-Fi is just getting sorted now.
Oh, right.
And because this is very weird context, but essentially new building, all the walls are lined with foil for insulation, apparently. So this is the only place that I get signal. It's also a place with the Wi-Fi. So if you hear like a little bit of background noise, do apologise, but
right. We can't.
You can't, because I think they're like tiptoeing around. So I was don't worry about it. It's all good.
When you're quiet, as long as there's no big bangs in the background, there's a gate on the audio, so don't worry. People can't hear like little noises in the background. It should be good.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's all clever, this audio stuff.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that as you, I mean, I don't know if you've got an answer to that, but as you grow as a company, you may become, your role may become bigger for a time while you set up policies and you set up the environment. But then it may just be occasional reminders, making sure that people attend seminars. I don't really know what you'd want to do as a company, but whatever it is, it would be advocating it, evangelizing it, and making sure that people are on the right track, I suppose.
Yes, and I would say it's linking into the last session that we did. It's especially important because it can be very high pressure, despite all the things. We're a very, very flexible company. It's the nature of the industry. There's going to be times where I have to work until 10 at night, not because somebody tells me to, because maybe we've just had like a really urgent, like contract role come in or something like that. So like it has to happen. So the need is always going to be there for it, whether we're small or big. And if in the future we grow, but we're growing faster than we expected already. So maybe in a couple of years' time, I might actually have to step into that briefly as a permanent role for a while and oversee the mental health and like well-being of everybody within the company, right from consultants to directors. And then will somebody else, like a specialist, actually come in and take over that role at some point? But I would always like, external people to like actually come in and, do sessions on different things. People who are actually like properly qualified in those areas. But I will be the person.
Well, mental health ambassador or coordinator. It comes in, it's the same as the Scrum Master. They're not necessarily an expert in everything that the team's doing, the people are doing. So you're not going to know what all of your people in your business do. You don't know their jobs, but you do know that it's important to have these particular policies or rules or something in place to make sure that the mental well-being of the team members is catered for. So yeah.
It's a big job, I think, and I think a really good way to do it is not kind of like assume what people want as well.
Exactly.
It's like it's just literally as simple as this sounds really obvious, but it's just ask people what they want. We when we had one of our like morning meetings, and I said to everybody, I was like, what, I'm going to book in for our first like mental health and well-being check-ins, which I'm going to do with all of you individually. Would you like it to be every week, every 2 weeks? Like you can all actually decide individually. Some people might want it more often. And I've told people that if they actually just have it every 2 weeks, but they need something after a couple of days, just put something in my diary, like where it's free. Just having that availability and being like really honest about it. When we have morning meetings and I'm having a bit of an anxious morning, like I'll just say it, because then people feel more comfortable in then saying it to me, because it's like, oh, okay, this is like normalizing conversation. For example, we've got two girls that started with us last week on Monday, and they've both been like really, really open and honest. So it just takes one person to start that, I think. But if the catalyst isn't there, it's not going to happen.
I think there's two things you can cater for there. One is people who don't want to be involved in that as well. You have to bear those kind of people in mind. On top of that, I mean, if I was a permanent employee, I would. I don't know what I'd do, because I've been contracted for so long that I run myself. You know, I've got me and the wife do our mental health things. We go out for meals and we go for runs. You know, we do things together to keep ourselves going. But then you've also got to cater for people that might need a bit of a help with it as well. That they might not know how to say that, how to tell people. You know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's not with mental health. There's one thing I've learned with the people I know who have mental health problems is a lot of the time they just saying to them, reach out to me if you need a hand, isn't good enough. Sometimes with some people is sitting them down and saying, look, are you okay? Are you okay? And actively engaging and actively even maybe, I mean, I'm not a therapist, I don't know, but actively asking them and poking them and making them maybe slightly uncomfortable so they will talk to you about it. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but it's worked for me.
And again, it's going to be a bit of like, if you're working with like a, you know, new team, like new employees, it's going to take you a little bit of time to figure out what kind of like person people are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, no, everyone's individual and everyone's got their own foibles. Everybody, there's my wife's got a saying. My wife's got a saying that if you can imagine that type of person, they exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you are. That they were. Whenever we say nobody will ever do that, and then we say that's the same thing to each other, and we're like, actually, you know what? I bet somebody is into that, or you know, has that problem or whatever, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not assuming the kind of like support people. Assuming the kind of like support that people need. It's like actually sit down and like talk to your people, like take some feedback as well. You know, first time I'm going to be doing these like mental health and wellbeing catch-ups. I ask them what they want to talk about. I'm going to ask them if the frequency is okay, if kind of like the way that I'm doing it is okay. Would you rather do it through phone or like through a Zoom call? And it's not going to be like a group thing where I'm going to ask them together. I'm going to ask them individually, because I bet you all three of them are going to say different things, and that way I can actually tailor the support that I give to them specific to that person. I think
there's a danger there that you might become a therapist or a sounding board as well, which is, I mean, fair enough. If you want that, that's fine. And there's also a danger that it could be negative as well. And I know this is a bit wishy-washy, but trying to see the positive or try and change things into a positive. You know, I'm sure you've had this in some of your training. You know, try and look at the positive or find positive outcomes. Not solving problems, but try and look at the good things that are happening. And you know, that it depends on the mental health issue as well.
It depends exactly. Depends what it is, and like I'm not there to be like people's. Not like a therapist. Sometimes people just need somebody to just listen. So this is what I'm going to say. Look, if you want to just have a little bit of a vent about something, vent to me. If there's anything that you're struggling with, I can either advise based on maybe my own experience or training. But if it's something that I'm not qualified to, I'll just point them in the right direction and encourage them to get that help, because I think that's one thing which is like really difficult. So, I mean, I had CBT. I was going to say training, not CBT therapy, but T stands for therapy, so I'm just repeating myself.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, but go on.
Cognitive behavioral therapy. So if anybody hasn't heard about it, it's used as a sort of treatment for a variety of mental health disorders. So I had it over a course of 5 sessions for like depression, and essentially what it does is helps you kind of like rewire the way that your brain thinks. And I was quite skeptical at first. I wasn't totally sure. Again, I know this is going off on a tangent, but it's just being really open about it's okay to go and get some help, you know, get some therapy. So if somebody came to me, I was like, I really need some help. Like I'm like really depressed. And like I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist or psychologist or whatever, but this is this is like the CBT that I had, and I found it really, really helpful. So this is the way that you do it. You go to your GP, they'll refer you, give you contact numbers, a bit of a wait list. This how, that's the kind of information that you can share, because I didn't really know how it worked, to be honest. So I get what you mean. You've got to draw like you've got to have some boundaries.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
you have to be clear with that as well.
I don't want to get calls at 9 or 10 at night as well, unless it's genuinely like a crisis situation, then yeah, 100%. Anybody that I know, I say you can do that. But, you got to have a boundary between what's real life and what's not.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I said work is work, and no matter how you look at it, yes, work is there to support you and people at work and mental health ambassadors and the HR department and everything else, but they're there for work purposes.
Yes.
However, a lot of the time we forget that humans are human, and humans are people are humans. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. It's the human element of work that gets removed a lot, and it's, by the sounds of it, your employer is very focused on the human element, the fact that emotion is important. Emotion is good in some, strong emotions rather are great in some instances and bad in others, and the world misses that a lot. And I suppose that's one of the reasons that I contract, is that I was so sick of that everywhere that I worked. They didn't really care. I didn't really care, because they didn't care. And I never asked. But then again, back then it wasn't, it still is a bit taboo, but it was a bit more taboo then to talk about it. And again, I didn't have the confidence to talk out about these things. I think the world's moving in the right direction.
Yes, yeah, I think we're going in, taking strides in, not just sort of like within our company, but from like what a lot of people talk about. And it's not that less people are suffering from like mental health problems, but I think like the support, sort of like medically and also like from the workplace has changed like quite a lot, and like people's attitudes. And if you can sit there and sort of openly tell people, maybe I, suffer from like bipolar disorder and some of the like lesser common ones as well, then I think we are moving in the right direction. But it's taking steps to sort of like foster that like culture.
Yeah,
I suppose.
absolutely.
It takes time, but I think just by like doing things like these, like I was so happy that you'd obviously seen like a couple of my posts on LinkedIn about mental health, and this is what you approached me to talk about. And I was so happy, because I thought, we can be really open and honest about it. Like people can actually listen in, I can share the link, and we can actually start to have a discussion about it. Because sometimes I don't want to constantly post stuff on LinkedIn, because I don't want people to think that, posting about the same thing, because it really like that engaging. Some people sometimes like comment in the post, but this is a lot more like interactive. I feel like I learn a lot about myself and the topics as well, just from like being here. So I'm glad we got it off in 2 seconds though, because you can go on forever.
It's the thing is that we talk about it a lot on this show. I mean, I'm free and open. I'll talk to anybody about anything, and I always have been like that. Josie's very similar about, she's very open, honest, bubbly, and we haven't got the strongest personalities, but we do this to keep ourselves sane. This is part of our mental well-being. We've got, I mean, my only employee is my wife, and I spend all my life with my wife. She doesn't work with me day to day, but we're sending emails to each other about work-related things during the day. And sometimes, don't tell the boss, but sometimes I send her an email about what we're going to have for tea on Friday and that kind of thing. But you know what I mean? It's like, this podcast is part of Josie and I's mental well-being program. It keeps us going. It allows us to interact with new people. It allows us to meet new people. We both, I a lot of the time don't think that meeting new people is important, but you know what? It is. As much as I hate people, I love people. I genuinely do. I love meeting new people, and that's what this is about. And that's one of the reasons. We have a community guidelines or community ethics document that's on our website. We've got a business ethics and like a community ethics document, and they basically say this is what we stand for. These are our key tenets. We do this for fun mostly. Yes, there's a professional element to it, but it's about nurturing a community, and the more people will interact with us, the more happy we are. You know, we don't do it for the views, we don't do it for the likes, we don't do it to get the viewers. We're a small podcast, you know, we get plenty of people listening, but we don't get so many people watching on YouTube. You look at our YouTube figures and they're tiny, but it's not about that. It's about us. It's selfish. It's about keeping us sane, you know, and meeting new people.
Yeah, but what a fantastic way to do it as well. And because you've got it as like a regular thing as well, and you know that on a Thursday, this is what like you're like coming in to do. Do you know what I mean? I think that's probably an issue that I have at the moment, is that my life is a bit too much sort of like chaos. Every week is different. But again, that's what kind of gets me excited as well. I have no idea what my next week is gonna look like at all. Not any of the work days, not any of the evenings or the weekend, nothing. So everything's kind of make up as I go along. But I think what you're saying is that having this is your kind of like your little like haven, isn't it? You know that you're going to talk about something exciting. You're going to interact with the people that are like in the comments, and hopefully have like a new guest on as well. And that's bringing like values to life, having purpose, I think is one of the best things that's happened to my mental health.
I think I found my purpose when I met my wife, but that's beside the point. And I'll be as cheesy as I want, but that's exactly how I feel. I'm happy and content in my life. This is something that I do because I enjoy it. Yes, it's hard work. Don't get me wrong. Putting a podcast together is not an easy thing. You might know, or you do some yourself. You know, with the man. I don't know how the production goes on in that, but there are things going on. The amount of joy I get from this and the community and the dev streaming and things like that, it's worth it for me, you know? And yes, there's some stability to it, but I used to be similar to yourself. When I was younger, I had a lot more free time, let's say. Oh, no, hang on, no, I didn't. I had a lot less free time. I've got loads of free time now, and I don't do much with it. But the time that I did have free was basically chaotic. You know, if I wasn't doing something, I was planning on doing something, or I was joining a new band, or I was doing a gig somewhere, or I don't know, I was going out for drinks with some new people I've met in the pub, or so, you know, it was every day it was different. I've grown up, and I'm not saying that's what will happen to everybody, but I've grown up, and this is how I am now, and I'm quite comfortable. But anyway, we're getting off the subject, talking about me. Anyway, so we've had a few comments in chat.
Yeah.
We have Ancient Coder asked one right at the beginning of the podcast, and I did spot it, but we were kind of on a roll. When is it right to mention mental health issues on the interview or after you get the job? Now, we were talking about this right at the beginning. What do you think? I think it depends on their mental health issue.
Yes. I think it depends. It depends on what it is, how comfortable you feel, how comfortable that person has made you feel. So let's say, for example, if I feel, let's say at the moment, I'm definitely not going to be moving, but if something changed in like my situation, and I wouldn't feel like I needed to say, because it's quite like manageable for me, but I would mention it after like I get the job. But if, again, like you said about if you had like one leg but it didn't affect you coding, you probably wouldn't mention it at all. So it just depends. And like you actually can't, it's against I think it's like the ACAS rules that you actually can't discriminate. So if you're worried about somebody discriminating against your mental health if you mention it during the interview process, that's actually illegal. So it depends when you want to say it.
Yeah, the thing is what's illegal and what gets shoved under the carpet, and what's it called? Involuntary bias.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody doesn't like somebody because they've got a bias against the colour of their skin or anything like that, you don't know that. You don't know that CV's been put to the bottom of the pile because of that.
Exactly. But however, so let's say I personally, again, what you said before about putting it on a CV, personally wouldn't put it on my CV. However, I may address it. Let's say it's a multiple stage interview process. Maybe not in the first one, maybe in the later stages. Or if I don't mention it then, I definitely would mention it when like I get the job. And if that's going to be a problem, it's not somebody I want to work for.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
I would be very, very clear.
Air Adam 13, hello Air Adam 13. We haven't seen you in the chat before. Welcome. He says he doesn't think it, I'm assuming Adam is a he. Sorry if I've assumed something there, but it shouldn't be brought up in an interview. In their opinion, the mental health.
If it comes up in like conversation, this is such a difficult question.
It is.
Everyone's gonna have such different opinions. I think, personally, I would get quite not like deep for like an interview, but I want to have conversations on a level where this, if the person that is interviewing me is going to be someone I'm going to spend a good part of my life with for the foreseeable future, I need to know that I'm going to get on with them. So we're going to talk about other stuff. We're not just going to talk about the role, not going to talk about the company, not my experience. And if it comes up in that conversation, I'm going to like bring it up. This is like some of my like experiences, and maybe I talk about how I'd like to be like a bit of an advocate for it, if in like the future. Does that make sense?
That's absolutely brilliant, because what you've just done there, you took a while to get around to it, but what you've just done there is turned a positive spin on it. You sound like I said about Copper Beardy earlier. He said that on his CV he specifically states that he's had, he's raised 4 children and done a master's degree as well, in spite of having mental health issues. I mean, I personally don't think it should be on a CV, as I said, because it doesn't affect anything. It shouldn't affect anything, and it's not necessarily something that an employer needs to hear at that point, and it may potentially stop you from getting an interview or a job because of the biases we have. But it doesn't mean you can't talk about it, on a one-to-one basis in the interview, or again, if you feel comfortable. It's about gauging that situation.
Yeah, again, not a one-size-fits-all. Well, Adam just said that. I think he wanted better like wording around it, so it meant that the interviewer shouldn't be asking. Yes, 100% agree that it shouldn't be asked by an interviewer. You can bring it up as an interviewee. You shouldn't, let's say that HR are putting out like a job offer for you and doing all of that like on board and stuff. They shouldn't kind of like specifically ask about, mental health, or, do you have anything that like it should just be like a general thing, is there anything that, we should maybe know about like your physical or mental health that we can actually support you with, because it should only really go out after an offer. So for example, discrimination against like women, like children and things. One of my friends got asked she was in like a face-to-face like Zoom interview, and got inadvertently asked whether she had children or was planning to have children. And it was like, that's really wrong. And I put a post about this on LinkedIn. Yeah, you saw it. People fighting it out in the comments, and it's always a bit of a bloodbath when you talk about those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't be asking it in an interview, because that person will never know whether they haven't got the job because you've discriminated against them being a woman and potentially needing 9-12 months off for maternity leave.
Yep.
Or whether they just weren't like good enough for the job. It should be something that is asked when making the sorts of like, what is it? Can't think of the word.
Planning decisions within work.
Any adjustments that need to be made, any sort of like support that they're going to need, it should only really happen. You should only ask or give the opportunity for that person to talk about.
Again, it's removing that human element. Again, it's taking away the fact that yes, she's a woman. Yes, she might have a child at some point, but any woman could have a child. Most women could have a child at any point, and that's the point. Is it shouldn't matter that you have to cater for this. I could get the same job as a man, and I could go. Let's go back to the leg thing. I could have both my legs chopped off in an accident and need 12 months off work, and they would not be they'd not be able to sack me for it. Well, they would bat an eyelid. They'd be upset about it because that's 12 months of productivity lost for them. But that's beside the point. They have to support that. And the fact that just because you're a woman does not mean that and you might, you've got more, there's more likelihood that a woman will have a child than a man will have his legs chopped off,
Both legs.
Both legs.
The statistics are
But the point I'm trying to get, I'm making it extreme because it's daft. It's just humans. People are people, and Society needs to get over themselves. I'm getting ranty now.
But on that, really quickly, there was a woman in the comments who actually said, when asked that question, she said that she had 2 children, even though she had none, because then they just assume that she said, oh, I've got 2 teenagers. You probably just assume that she's not going to have any more kids.
I've got 2 toddlers, and that what they assume you might have a third.
Yeah, because then if you say I've got 2 teenagers, you know, for example, my mum, I'm 24, my brother's 19, so I mean, some people do have.
You know what the answer to that should have been, and I know, and this is exactly I'm not saying people will be able to think of this on the spot. Is it's none of your business. Can we move on to the next question, please?
It was a terrible interview.
Respectfully, that's none of your business. Can we please move on to the next question? And then if that starts a heated argument or debate saying, well, actually, it is our business because of this, that, and the other, then you walk out.
Yeah. Really.
Anyway, we are running well over. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions.
I think there were most of them, to be fair.
There was a few. Ancient Code has followed up with a few more things. What happens if you need time off, and that's related to your mental health, or those that take counselling? So we've kind of covered that during the whole show. So I know you've been around Ancient, but take them earbuds out and listen to what we're saying. Anyway, so we are going to have to close the show. Sorry, we're just about to be late, so hopefully we'll get this done and dusted soon. So, thank you very much, everybody. Before we close the show, though, we'll do our Bring Our Own Manual, which is our time to tell everybody something that we've learned this week. It could be related to what we're talking about today. It could be a techie thing. It could be something completely unrelated. So, Parul, what have you learned this week? What can you share with our listeners? Have you thought this through? Did I give you time before the show?
Yeah, you have given me time. There's been quite a lot, and like work things, but I might just do something like completely random.
That'll do. A random fact you've learned, or
in the past. Can it be from like the weekend?
Doesn't matter. You could lie to me. I don't care. I don't know, do I?
It could be like completely not true.
Well, it has to be something useful to our, to bring your own manual. It's about teaching other people something, productive.
Could you call it productive if it's food related?
Just tell us.
Okay.
As long as it's not rude or inappropriate, I think we're all right.
Hey. So this is a very underrated thing, which I feel like a lot of people actually don't know about. But instead of going to like the world food section in your supermarket, just go to a Chinese or Korean shop, and they literally have the best things in the whole world. Great selection of instant ramen, frozen dumplings, which you can just keep and just have anytime. You knew this was going to be a food related thing.
You're into your food, aren't you?
What?
I love me and my wife are big foodies. I made her a foodie. I love it. We do exactly the same. There's an Indian shop in Preston that we go to that's got a whole, just the vegetable section. There's some crazy stuff there that I'd never see in a normal, I don't mean normal. I mean, a Safeway. Yeah, the Safeway down the road, etc.
I'm with you on. So that's why I always encourage people, like, totally just go and explore. Going to be so much stuff that you don't know. I've just moved in with like my partner, and we are both like massive foodies. Probably one of the main reasons like why we're together. So I'm making us some dinner later. So I've got some pak choy with garlic, honey soy salmon and rice. So that's the plan. But yeah, so try Asian supermarkets. That's my Bring Your Own Manual. Nice. And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I said I'll tell you my Bring Your Own Manual before we move on. I'll let you de-introduce yourself shortly. So, what I've learned this week is a lesson I already knew, and this happens to me more often than not. A lot of the time when I do something and I don't do it, I'm really anal about things, right? If I don't do it right, and the way that my morals or my code of ethics or the way that my experience has taught me to do something, I almost always, something goes wrong. I did some work for a client, and this is absolute sacrilege, and it's quite embarrassing for someone like me who sits on his little pulpit soapbox and talks about it to everybody all the time. I did some work without a contract in place. Yeah, it was only a small piece of work, and this same client has paid me for work in a similar fashion before.
Yeah.
A few days worth of work, but I mean, it's still fairly high value, but it's anyway, had issues with payment, had issues with, not necessarily payment, with what I agreed to do to the client. I was absolutely clear. Everything was laid out in documents, in reports. There was no statement of work and no contract, but everything was laid out. And there were questions, because there was communication issues at their end, they basically thought I should have done something that I definitely didn't agree to. So I've now said I will do a bit of that piece of work to get the invoice paid, just to keep them happy, but that's about it, But it might have soured bridges and burnt bridges, and it's unfortunate because I was clear, but they weren't, and it is what it is. So yeah, learn my lesson there. Always have a contract. Always have a contract.
And buy ramen from Asian shops. So
and buy ramen from Asian shops.
Because seriously, like you got to move on from like chicken super noodles at some point. Like they have a whole aisle. Oh my god, I could have bought the whole thing. I'm pretty excited for my dinner.
We've had homemade Indian like tandoori couscous and chicken kebabs today. That's what we had.
Jeez.
But every night my wife cooks something really healthy, which like that, quite a nice, healthy, protein full meal. And then at the weekend, I'm the one who comes in and goes, right, let's go out for a meal on Friday, and then all weekend I'll do the cooking. But I just don't care. I'll just make mac and cheese with about 1 million grams of cheese in it, and
different types of cheeses. Now I know exactly what you mean. Well, I would love for some recipe inspo, so feel free to send me some stuff over through LinkedIn, because I think
let us know on LinkedIn what you want. Anyway, we have to close the show now, Parul. I could talk to you all night, but we're really going to have to go. So, thank you very much. We are now at the end of the show. Thanks to everybody in Twitch chat for joining in, and do feel and thanks to everybody listening to the podcast in the future. Finally, thank you very much, Parul, for coming on again. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point in the future, talking about other things. I still want to get you on talking about code.
That one.
Sorry?
I thought we booked in for that one.
I don't think we booked in for it, but we'll talk about it after the show. We'll see if we can get you in. And feel free now to pimp any links, any social media channels, your employers, etc. It's your time to shine.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like the main thing where you can access all of my links is on my LinkedIn. So I'm on linkedin.com/the coding recruiter 1, because somebody has the coding recruiter, and I was very upset about that. So I'm the coding recruiter 1, linkedin.com/coding recruiter 1.
Good stuff. And our time to pimp, you can visit our website on www.dnistream.live, where you'll find links to all our social media platforms, all our podcast channels, around 1 million of them, Apple Podcasts and everything else. And I think our podcast goes out on Monday mornings now at about 8 o'clock in the morning. So you can give us some feedback on there as well. You can send us a funny dev story if you want to be a guest on the show or anything like that. You've got any comments, you've got any further questions that you want me to pass on to Parul, etc. If you don't want to get hold of her directly and you want to do it through us, just drop us a message on the website. Lastly, do not forget to follow, which is below, our Twitch channel, and you'll get notified whenever we go live in the future. Lastly, we hope to see everybody next week at 7 o'clock Thursday night, and we'll thank you very much, and we'll say good night. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.